Hi, Kevin. It's great to get to talk to you again, and I'm really looking forward to you sharing your life story with everyone. That'd be really nice. So, yeah.
Hi, David. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, of course, a lot of things have happened since we spoke the first time, but I kind of wanted to go back and go through where the journey started for me, which is apparently from day one.
Yes.
And this has come as a recurring dream that's happened all throughout my life, where I was in utter darkness, but there was calm to the darkness. Excuse me. And everything was wonderful and nothing had to be done. And I saw this shaft of light come from the side. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And this is memory coming up when I say I thought this well, maybe this is no different than darkness. So anyway, sure enough, I entered into this great light, this white light, and it occurred to me everything was fine. Nothing else needed to happen or needed me to do anything. And that's kind of really the way it is. You just really don't have to do anything. It's just being accepting of your true nature. But anyway, the next thing I remember is being upside down, getting spanked on the butt by the doctor. So, but I do remember that, and of course, that's just part of it. And I didn't think he was rude or anything, but time went on, and I remember being in my crib, and I had a window right next to it, and whenever the moon would come up, I'd reach out and try to grab it. I think, well, that's interesting. What is this thing here? So, nothing didn't bother me, but it was just an interesting occurrence, and not aware of my body at all, of course. And right along about that same time, I was 2 years old, and my grandmother had come to visit us because my youngest brother was born, and she came to see him. But one day I found myself at the end of our block, and then I noticed her. She was holding my hand, and there was a big line of barns there that hold the cotton, where the cotton. We're a big cotton community, cotton and oil.
Texas.
Yeah, right here in West Texas. Yeah, and so looking at all these barns, and presently a little yellow tractor came out. Looked like a toy, and there was this man on there, and I started reaching out for it, and I started trying to grab that. And I said, "Can I have that?" And she said, "Can you have what?" I said, that toy there. And I pointed, and she said, "That's not a toy, that's a tractor, and it's way off. It's way down the road." And said, that's a real tractor, and that's a real man on it. And so I said, okay. And just different things like that. And the quiet times used to come upon me. These moments of quiet used to just shut everything out. And the first one I remember is back in the 50s. They didn't bring the tree in till the day before.
Christmas tree, yeah.
Yeah, and we sat around decorating it, and my mom had set up a 3-dimensional nativity scene and put it up under the tree. And I was looking at all the little interesting people in there. There was the wise man, there was a cow and a sheep, and of course Mary and Joseph. But in the center was the Christ child, and I crawled in behind it. So I wonder what that looks like there from that. I could see a window behind the wise men. And and then I said, no, I can see what they're seeing if they were alive. Does the fact that they're small, would that change the perception? And I went into this really deep, calm space. And I was just perplexed by it. But the calm didn't last long because my mom came in, shooed me out from under the tree, and
Yeah.
she said, "You turn that over, and we're going to be in trouble." So
it's interesting the way those events were a kind of collapsing of time and space. Each of those you described, like the grabbing the moon and grabbing the tractor and then seeing the wise men. It's as though you were very familiar with a realm that didn't involve time and space. And so you could recall that and enter into it.
Yes, I agree with that. And the very next year, by the way, I was raised with 4 brothers. One of them was a twin.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have mentioned that just a minute ago, but he came down with it was the most bizarre thing. Just one Saturday afternoon, he started throwing up blood. And I said, wow. Mm. And that deeply affected me because, this is my twin and we're good buddies. And, twins are really closer than you think.
Yes.
And
what age would you have been at this stage, Kevin?
This was when I was, I guess I was 7.
Yeah.
They took him to the hospital and he was away from us for 2 weeks. They wouldn't tell us anything, but I sensed there was something really bad going on. But because mother wasn't happy anymore. She was a really happy person, smiles all the time. But one day we were told that he was getting to come home, and so we were all real happy. And my brothers and I were in the playroom and we were playing, and I was fiddling with my Play-Doh, and the phone rang, and I looked up and I said, "Keith's not coming home today." And my brother said, "What? Yeah, he's coming home today. He'll be here in an hour." I said, "He won't be here today." The babysitter walked in and said, "Keith's not coming home." They did a test and found out they found something wrong, but they can't let him go yet. And my brothers looked at me and said, "How did you know that?" And I said, "Well, how is it that you didn't know that?" And I just assumed everybody got messages like that.
Yes.
And that was real perplexing, but to everybody. But I told my dad about it. He said, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "That's something." He said, "You had that in your mind?" Yes. I said, "Maybe the boy's psychic." You think, Rose? Anyway, as I got older, I don't know if you understand what I say here, but people feel left or right-handed.
Yes.
Apparently, but I never noticed that, and I always noticed my dad having to give me special attention when I was writing. Mm-hmm. He said, "Now I'm not going to let you write terrible like every left-handed in the world." And I had no idea why he was saying that, so he showed me, and he showed me how to write. And he had real pretty handwriting, and he showed me how to do it. He said, "Don't do this." Like a lot of left-handers do this. And so the next thing that was brought up was he bought us a bunch of baseball gloves, brand new Rawlings baseball gloves. They smelled good. He passed them out to us. He said, "Wait a minute, Kevin, that's not yours. You got to wear this one. It goes on your right hand." Huh. And I said, "Why?" I said, "Because you can't use your right hand." So anyway, we started playing baseball. I could not throw to save my life.
With your right hand?
Whenever I'd throw with my left hand, which I was supposedly left-handed, because I wrote with my left hand, and I ate with my left hand, and I picked things up with my left hand. So that's all I knew. And that was comfortable, but I still didn't notice why there was a difference. Anyway, one time they were playing baseball out there, and they really didn't like me to play because I couldn't throw the ball very well. But anyway, the ball came over to me. Somebody hit a ball and came over to me, and I didn't have any glove on. I picked up with my right hand and just burned it in right on the money. They said, "Wow, how'd you do that?" I said, "I don't know. Try that again." So we threw the ball. I picked up my right hand again. I just nailed it right in his glove real hard.
Amazing.
And instantly I realized, dang, I can use both hands. And ever since then, apparently people notice handedness. I don't notice it. It's all kind of a one thing, kind of oneness. And I learned that I could write with both hands, same ways.
Wow.
I could write with both hands at the same time.
Could you?
And my mother saw me doing that one time. We had a blackboard in our playroom, and I was doing it. She said, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Well, it just ends things quicker. I can write this whole sentence out quicker." And I guess you're ambidextrous. I said, "Well, that's a good word. It's a big, $10 word, but I understood what she meant." So even when I went to dental school, because I didn't know left from right, I was just one person. But when we were doing our practicals, we'd have to pick up a tooth, look at it, tell you what number it was in the mouth. They only had 10 seconds to do it. And you had to know left from right. This is left from, so I drew an L on my left hand and an R on my right hand. So I didn't even have to take time to do this left thing. If you're left, it's going to do an L. So I just didn't want to take that much time. So, okay. So anyway, handedness always seemed funny to me. People feel that. And but going back, back to grade school, I was given a top for Christmas. You wrap a string around it, you throw it, and I got real good at it. And I could do it with both hands equally. And it was my favorite toy. But one day it came up, I lost it. And my dad said, "Well, we'll find it." He said, and I didn't find it, but I kept thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about this top. And I looked everywhere for it. I looked for places where it couldn't have been, like down in the middle of town, around the town square. We drove around the corner one time, and there that dumb thing was. I said, "Dad, there's the top." He stopped and he picked it up, and it sure looked like it. It was the same color, but there was one little difference. There was a stripe around it. He said, "Now, Kevin, yeah, this is the top. It looks awful lot like it. It's real tempting to take this home, but maybe somebody else is looking for it as hard as you were." So just coincidences like that popped up every so often. And then it kind of settled down for me a little bit. In other words, I didn't force the psychicness. I didn't think it was something I should develop. I didn't need to develop it. Something would happen on its own.
Yes.
Even though some people say, if you want to get psychic, you can develop that. And that's probably true too. Since we're all got that sense, we've probably got several senses we're not aware of. But
yes.
So anyway.
So these things just come to you effortlessly. You don't. There's no intention.
Yes.
They just come to you. Yeah,
they pop in there. They pop into the awareness, and there's no questioning it. It's just, okay, that's interesting, and I accept it. I accepted all. Okay, this is all it's supposed to be, and I'm assuming everyone felt the same way as me, but that's not true. And so I made friends with this little girl. She was really nice, very pretty. And we got to be real close buddies. And then through some act of noble act I performed that I wasn't even aware I had done, she decided I should be her boyfriend. And
what age were you at by this stage?
I was 11.
Right. Okay.
And we were so close to each other. Even the teachers would check on us. I had a male teacher said, "Kevin, I need you to help me with the book room, help me move some books." And so we went in there and he picked out this one book and, "Okay, I've got it." I said, "Now, Kevin, how are you and Janet doing?" I said, "Well, we're doing well." "She sure is pretty." And I said, "I think so, yes." And so that's how close we were. And even both teachers would check in on us. "How are you doing?" And
yes.
And that seemed funny, but that was cool with me. But she and I had a conversation one time. I don't know why I brought it up. I asked her, when were you born? She said, "I was born in 1954. In September." I said, "Wow." I knew immediately. I had an expiration date on our friendship, but it was my own insecurities telling me that, of course, because I thought, well, how would an older girl want to be with me anyway? But sure enough, that turned out to be true.
Wow.
It didn't last more than 7 months, but it was a great 7 months, and I dealt with it, and I went on and said, "Okay, that's a chapter gone, and we'll go to the next one." And
but you just
bomb scare. Go ahead.
Knew that it was going to end, did you?
Yes, I was aware that it was going to end, and it wasn't going to be long before it did end. And we'd had a really great friendship, and in fact, I mostly cared about the friendship. She wanted to be my girlfriend, and so I said, okay, you're my girlfriend.
Did you want more commitment from you?
Yeah. Yes. And so that was a lovely time in life. It's a pleasant memory that I still have recurrent dreams. My birth is a recurrent dream. She is a recurrent dream. And then when I was 2 years old, we were out in a place called Tornado Alley. And sure enough, the house where I was in my grandmother's house, and the tornado hit the house, and it knocked this big lamp on top of me. And that's the last thing I remember. So the tornadoes, and the birth, and then Janet. And those come up real regularly. So
do you still have those now?
Yeah, actually, yes. The birth one's not so much lately. And did I mention this about my nephew?
No.
My nephew. I thought the birth thing was funny. I thought, I must have just dreamed that, just associated. But my nephew, I was 40 years old, and we were playing together, and he's a little bitty toot, but I guess he was 4 years old, and I'd bought him some bubbles to play with, and he had a lot of fun with that. And then he looked at me and said, "Kevin, were you at the hospital when I was born?" I said, "Yes, I was. I really was." And I said, "I heard you crying." And I leaned into the door and opened it up, and there you were. And we looked at each other. And that's when I knew I loved you. And anyway, he said, "Well, why was there white stuff on my arm? What was that white stuff on my arms?" I said, "Oh my gosh, you remember that?" He said, "Yes." And apparently, when you're a baby, your arms are kind of floating out in front of you. And he could see that. And I didn't know how to tell him, well, that's the protective layer over your skin called the caseosa, vernix caseosa. I said, "But I will demonstrate it for you." So when you're in your mommy's tummy, you're in a kind of a bubble, and you came out, that bubble burst. And it actually doesn't happen that way, but essentially,
yes.
So I said, let me show you this bubble. So I blew a bubble, and I put it down on his arm, and you could see the residue of the soap on his arm. I said, that's what it's like. He said, oh. So when I saw his mom the next time, I was babysitting. So when she came home, I said, you won't believe what Braden just told me. She said, what? I said, he asked me what the white stuff on his arm was. He said, well, sit down and I'll tell you what he asked me yesterday. He said, Mommy, do you remember when I came out of your tummy? She said, yes, it was a great time for me. And so she said, why was that man with the green mask and the green cap on pulling my hair? Braden had been born with a lot of baby hair. And in the afterbirth, the latex gloves get sticky and it's hard to keep from tugging. So he felt that, and he remembered that he wanted to know what was going on. And I said, I said, well, I thought I was crazy that I believed in my birth, but apparently
it's amazing that you remembered your birth. That must be a family ability.
Yeah, well, actually, he wasn't my real nephew. His mom was my first office manager when I opened up my own practice. So we got to be buddies, and she got married during that time, and her husband and I were good friends, and we were friends with her, and along started coming the babies. So they just kind of adopted me as their bachelor uncle.
Yeah.
So actually it wasn't familial at all. So
it's interesting they came into your space though, and
yes,
remember, and that you were present. And
yes.
So you had the eye contact, and he remembered that.
Yes. Yes, he remembered the eye contact, and he and I are best friends even to this day. He's 22, 23 now, and he'll ring me up all the time, or he'll send me an email about something he's read, something about Stoicism, or he sent me something that Plato had written, and he wanted me to discuss with him about it. And so he and I were just real good friends, you know.
That's great. Yeah.
And so and a lot of times I can tell when he's about to call, so I get close to the phone, and I just feel a sensation that he's trying to get a hold of me.
Yeah. And you mentioned before about some of the psychic experiences you had with your twin brother.
Yes. Whenever he would feel something, even if we weren't in the same town or the same block or whatever, the same room, I would feel it as well. One real interesting thing that happened, I was already out in dental, had my own dental practice, and I put my arm down on the chair I was next to, and this electric shock went up through my arm. And he'd called me that night. I said, what's wrong with your left arm? He said, I don't know. It's this electricity keeps going through it. And I said, I know, I felt it. And of course, everybody assumed that twins are going to have this kind of ability, and they do. Yes. But mine didn't end there. It didn't end there with just my brother. It happened. This was before I got into dental school. I was working in an auto parts store. A buddy of mine, I didn't even realize where I worked. He came in and said, he shook my hand and said, Kevin, I've come to say goodbye. I said, well, where are you going? He said, well, I'm going to take my girlfriend to the dog races in El Paso, Texas. I said, well, okay, we'll have a good time. And he stood right up and turned around, and that's how long he was in the room. And the guys working for him said, well, that seemed weird. And I said, yes, it was real weird. But that night, I hadn't been thinking about it. I went to sleep, and I had this dream where I and another person, which I assumed was my brother at the time, we were at this overpass, and these bright lights were coming down on us like somebody shooting flaming arrows at us. And one of them hit his head and exploded. It just exploded right in front of me. And that shocked me awake. And I looked at the clock because I knew that was important. But I worried the rest of the night because I thought, well, it looks like maybe that was my brother. But I said, no, wait a minute. The guy in the dream had a big red mustache. And sure enough, it was that guy. He was killed at that very moment.
Wow.
But I didn't know that until it was 2:30 in the morning, like I said. But at 2:30 the next afternoon, a friend of mine I worked with called me up and said, "Did you hear about Monty? He was killed in a car wreck." I said, "Yes, I know. I saw it. It was at 2:30 in the morning, and they were at an overpass, and a drunk man was coming down the wrong way and ran into him." He said, "How'd you know that?" I said, I don't know. I just know it. I dreamed it. I had a dream. So it wasn't limited to just my brother, you know.
No, that's brilliant. Yeah.
And
so that's continued right through your life, has it? The psychic ability?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sometimes even when you're getting a really strong urge, well, is that true or not? My mother and I were real close, always were. And I guess this was 10 years ago, and she was getting old, and she was living with her best friend. They'd been best friends for 60 years. And I talked to her once or twice a week on the phone. And it was, it happened to be Halloween night.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this strong urge. "You better call your mom." I said, I just talked to her yesterday. And she didn't even remember much of my conversation. She was starting to get a little forgetful. Not full-blown dementia, just forgetful.
Yeah.
And you better call her. I said, I'll call her tomorrow. Sure enough, her best friend called me that morning and said, "Your mom passed away." So that was not good.
No.
And I always tell everybody, if they have an ear for it, if you get a strong urge from a family member, act on it, or you're going to be sorry. Yes. And of course, I was devastated by it, that I didn't call her.
Yes.
It was plenty of time before she passed away.
Wow.
So anyway, things like that come and go. And have I mentioned at this point when I walked into the grocery store?
No, you haven't. No.
Okay. When I had my first practice, we were in a shopping center, and about 50 yards away was a grocery store. And I stopped in there to get something to snack on before the day started. And a man was standing there as I walked in. I said, "If that guy didn't have a mustache, he would look just exactly like a guy I worked for 40 years earlier." And I said, "I would sure like to talk to him, tell him I didn't turn out to be such a loser." When I was 18 years old, I thought, well, you just can't tell me anything. So we didn't have a good relationship. So I knew he was a good guy, but so I bought my snacks, went over to the grocery store, and there he was standing there. He was standing right there. And I realized that was my first instant demonstration, even though I hadn't wanted it. All I wanted on it was just, I wished I could tell him.
Yes.
And so a few minutes later, I was standing there telling him. And I was just thinking of you, and I can't believe you're here. But one thing I wanted to tell you is, I wanted you to know I didn't turn out to be such a loser. And he said, "I don't remember it that way." But I said, "Well, anyway, I was your worst employee. Just take my word for it." So different sundry things like that would happen. And
then you came across some spiritual teachers. You were saying that there were certain spiritual teachers that inspired you.
Yes. By the way, I had a buddy of mine. We've been friends since the 50s. Mm-hmm. He said, "Me and my girlfriend are going to go take transcendental meditation. You want to come?" I said, "Yeah." Mm-hmm. And so we did, and we went together, and we went through the initiation. We listened to the Maharishi, mm-hmm. And so it came time for our initiation, where we got our mantra. So the gentleman that was running the thing, and we went to a room with a kind of an altar type thing, and I sat down. He said, "Have a seat there." So he started saying something, and I don't remember what it was, but suddenly I could feel my tailbone really buzzing, and then it blew right up to my head and kind of wrapped around my head like this and pulled tight. And I said, "Well, something's going on here. Maybe this stuff is the real deal." So that's where I started transcendental meditation. And I don't think I'd mentioned that before, but
no. So that's kundalini experience.
Yes, kundalini experience, which, by the way, I had again. I had been working out real hard, and I'd run real hard on the treadmill. And one day I decided, I'm going to try to run 5 miles an hour for an hour. And I did that. I'd worked up to that. And I stepped off the treadmill and I said, something's not right. Something's different. And I went home, I got my truck. I said, yeah, then this weightless feeling came over me again. Anyway, I went on to bed and went to sleep. About 11 o'clock, it's as if somebody jerked my arm and set me up. That's how rapid and quick and fluid it was. And I could feel that buzz in my tailbone. And it was loud and it was vigorous, and it didn't hurt. In fact, it felt pleasant. And I noticed it going down my legs. And then it started slowly kind of going up my spine. And when it reached my feet, it blew right on up to my skull. And there was that twisting again around my head, which I never could. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that was a kundalini experience. And even when I read about them later, they kind of mentioned that it wasn't really good to practice that. So for whatever reason, I don't know, but I just got them automatically.
Yes.
And I sat there, I guess it was 2 or 3 hours, and just this weightless feeling, and it was bliss that was almost too much bliss to deal with.
Yes.
So I was sitting there and said, well, this is great, and this would be nice to do this forever. I said, but I've got a tooth to pull in the morning at the office, and I've got to get back to sleep. So I did. I never had that experience again. So
so what age would you have been then, Kevin?
I guess it was right around the same time that Braden was born.
Yes.
And I guess I was in my 40s.
Yes.
And
so it was before you started the spiritual search with the teachers.
Yes. The first, I was unhappy in my work. I didn't really enjoy doing it. I said, there's got to be something more than just getting up. And I said, it's so bizarre. It's counterintuitive to think all we do is get up to fill our bellies and go to work so we can have money to have a place to stay and sleep, and then get up and fill our bellies. And it just hit me so strangely. And so I had fallen into a deep depression. And I went to a bookstore and said, I'm not leaving this bookstore till I found something that answers it. And I walked into the bookstore, and the first little stand I saw was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I read some of the book cover, and I said, this is it. This is what I came in for. I got it. I got the book and also the audio version. Never stopped listening to it while I was in the car. Listen to it a lot.
Yes.
So
this was this when the book was first released?
Yes, just first release. Yes, and it was amazing. I said, this is what I've been looking for. This, and especially the story of his enlightenment, and when he, and I thought, this is it. And I said, this is where I'm headed, and this is why I'm here, to figure out why I'm here. In fact, a lot of people I had an experience when I was 19, and I forgot to mention to you, where I woke up one day. I woke up one day and suddenly all this scenery started happening that I wasn't. So why is that sitting there? Why is that there? And I felt like my personality had just vanished, but the awareness was still there, and it shocked me. And in fact, I plunged down into that state for about a year, and I thought I'd gone insane. But
there doesn't seem to have been any ego for you, Kevin. That, you know, that's quite unusual, really. You know, just the way you relate your whole story. That, you know, there's no. It's just really a matter of fact. There isn't. You know, you're not trying to impress anybody, and you know, I really like that. It's just really natural, and so I can understand why that experience arose, really.
And if I'd had somebody to talk to that could have helped me through that, that would help me so much.
Yes.
But I had to slug through it myself, and I thought the only thing I'm worried about is I'll commit suicide, because it was so dark and disappointing and never ending. I never got any rest. I never got a break from except in sleep. And so I told my dad about it. He said, well, let's go see a psychiatrist. I said, no, I'm not going to do that, because they'll put me on some drugs and that'll just make it worse. And I'll be on those drugs from then on. And, but it'd been about a year, and I was getting kind of frustrated. My mom said, you know, I know I went through something for the last year, and I know you haven't felt comfortable telling me, but do you think you could mention it to me? I said, yes, I can. And so I said, this is what happened. I told her the whole story and all the psychic things that happened to me that kept me in this state of being really blown away. And she said, do you think that you could go play like imagine yourself in the theater. We had a real nice Art Deco theater in our hometown on the square, and you're in that theater, and you're warm and comfortable, and it's completely dark, and you see the screen there, and the images start coming across the screen. Well, the screen is you, but the images are just the scenery that are going by you. Snapped me out of it. It left me just as quick as it came over me.
It's amazing.
And I don't know where she heard that. I don't know how she knew that, because you know, she was, you know, fairly into the, you know, at first in the Baptist church and then in Christian Science, and maybe they mentioned something like that in that, but I don't know. But that's
so tuned into you, though.
I'm sorry.
She was really tuned into you then, to be able to read.
Yes, she was.
So clearly.
Yes, she understood immediately what I was going through, and found the right words to bring me out of it. And but anyway, going back to Eckhart Tolle, I listened to it. I said, you know, this is good, and it's really opened my eyes. I said, something's missing, and I don't know what it is. And it may have been the fact that he mentioned reincarnation, which didn't seem to line up with the way I felt. It seemed like reincarnation would just be a repeat of all this unpleasantness.
Yeah.
So I kept going to different books, and then I stumbled upon a gentleman that had written a big, long, massive tome about his time in India, and it was called a Secret Search in India. And I read that book, but he also took out 3 chapters. He'd been asked to take out 3 chapters. He spoke of Ramana Maharshi. And I read that, and I said, well, you know, I've run across this name before, and Eckhart Tolle had mentioned it. So then I bought everything I could buy after I read that first little pamphlet. It was basically just a 3-chapter pamphlet.
Yes.
And then everything I could find about him, I started reading. Ramana Maharshi, yes. one of his books was Be As You Are by David Godman.
Yes.
Actually, the Maharshi never really wrote anything. I think he just more or less, like when he wrote the Who Am I? He spoke that to one of his devotees.
Yeah.
And but David Godman felt the call. He's our age, by the way.
Yes.
He felt he's a little older, but he felt the call to go to India, and he wrote that book. And I said, "Oh wow, this explains it. This fills in the gaps." And then another book that was written about during the Maharshi's life is called Talks.
Yes.
Talks with the Maharshi.
Yes.
And I just devoured that book, and because
that was a devotee taking notes, wasn't it? Talks with the Maharshi.
Yes, the devotees were taking notes, and they knew it was important. And they, especially one particular, Muruganar, I think was his name.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote down a lot of things about books themselves, but it was so poetic. I didn't really understand what he was saying. You know, it was a kind of a poetic tribute to the Maharshi about how much he appreciated being released. And then the teacher Papaji, Papaji, H.W. Punjabi, and I picked up his book and started reading that, and he had come face to face with the Maharshi.
Yes.
After he'd had the same urge, I got to know what's going on here, and he said, I just want to know how to find God. And then one afternoon, there was a knock on his door. He opened it up, and there was this old man. He said, "You'll find God on that mountain there." He was pointing to the mountain where the Maharshi was. So he was wasting no time getting there. But when he got there, he saw the same man, the Maharshi. He said, "Oh, you're just one of those tricksters that we have all over India now." He said, and his people that were around him all the time said, "He's never left this mountain. He's been right here all this time." And so he walked in and he interrupted the Maharshi during a nap time or a bath time. And he had this wonderful experience where he just collapsed and fell down to this quietness like I had been doing. So I started seeing all this stuff is coming. And I realized as I read that none of the big name gurus believed in reincarnation, which really helped me out. And the Maharshi specifically told one of his devotees, they were talking about reincarnation. He said, so what about reincarnation? He said, I'm here to tell you there is no such thing as reincarnation because you haven't been incarnated now.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where you need to explore right there.
Yes.
And that, of course, I think Eckhart Tolle's done great work, and I love him, and he really helped out. But as I went forward, I'd read book after book on people that had these incredible awakenings, and they'd explain them. But I always went back to David Godman's book and anything about the Maharshi, anything that was written, I read. And each time I went back, I'd start understanding it a little bit more. And then I got a kind of a handle on it. I wasn't in this state of bliss all the time. I was just living my life out as a dentist. And but I felt that bad feeling come on me again that this can't be all there is to it. Going to dentistry, pulling out teeth, putting in fillings. And it was so unpleasant. And it started driving me inward. It was life and the scenery started becoming real repugnant to me. And so I really started back again with my meditation.
Yes.
It came to a head when COVID came around and people were so upset about it. There was this great tremor about it, and rightly so, but I didn't see it that way. I said, this is just more of the repugnance that I want to get away from. And and by the way, I missed one. It's about you. I saw you on Conscious TV 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And everything you said, man, this cat has it. He knows what's going on. And the way that you and Renate McNay interacted, and then you and Ian McNay.
Yes.
And I said, by gosh, I'm going to fly over there and I'm going to try to see these people. But anyway, you had mentioned a podcast with John Wheeler.
Yes.
I think that was the one it was. But anyway, I sent you an email and to ask you, do you remember this? And how do I get a hold of this podcast? And you straight away told me, and I got it. And everything just kind of lined up. But anyway, going back to this past 2 years, I would start this. The feeling of being is the most important thing there is, and I kept going back to it.
Mm.
I said I would meditate every day, but not just at night or with my eyes closed. I would drive around and place my full attention on my own awareness. Mm. And the feeling of the first person, non-alien feeling of being. And that's where I kept my attention. And I would drive around for hours. And then it started coming around again, this peace I started feeling. And then I said, I must see what's on Conscious TV. I missed that show. And there you were again with Renate and talking about the effortless consciousness, not engaging your consciousness, just being effortless. And that really, this is it. I told my brother about it. I said, you've really got to look at this. This is what you've been looking for, because he's been going through the same thing I am. When I was 19 and I had that first bad experience, kids say, well, who am I and why am I here? I didn't say that. I said, what am I and why is here? That was the most wild thing. Why is there a here?
Yes.
So
I like that.
Anyway, I saw yours, and I really started looking into that, and I listened to that same telecast several times, and you explained everything so clearly, nothing else had to be explained. And so it came to my attention that you had talked with Rhonda Burns, and she had found her true nature by talking to you. And I said, I got to know this. I looked at the book, The Secret, that she'd written first, and it seemed like a kind of a repeat of a lot of things that I'd read before, especially when I was younger. Think and Grow Rich, and
these were the books you mentioned your dad had, and so you
yes, my dad had it. Yes, my dad had a lot of books, and he was a seeker, and so I got that from him. And he was a deeply unhappy man too, but
wow.
who knew why? But anyway, it was a spiritual journey he was on, and my mom and he were always at odds, and and he'd show me different things. One time he showed me they had an argument about what the minister had said during church. They argued all the rest of the afternoon, and my dad came to me and he pulled out a book off the top shelf. He said, read this, and you're going to read about some people that really know what they're talking about. They have real faith, and it's not just somebody up at an altar talking down to them. And then he said, Kevin, if you find yourself in a big room and there's somebody on this side of you and somebody's on this side of you and in front and behind you, and then each one of those people can say the very same thing, and you're all looking at this one guy up the front, you're not hearing the truth. So he said, read this book, and it was the Quran. So I started reading.
Wow.
And so anyway, going back to You published something on the internet about your true nature and how to experience it, and even talked about it with Renata.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, I'm going to write him a letter, because I see that he's helped Rhonda Byrne. I said, I'm just not, and I thought, I'm not into any demonstrations. I don't care about demonstrations in the scenery. And I kind of mentioned that, and I said, I just want the peace that passeth all understanding, and that was the demonstration I wanted. So anyway, you were nice enough to write back, and I thought, wow, that's great. So we arranged that first meeting, and essentially that's where it's been for me. And so while I'm not in this ecstatic state of bliss, I am in this weightless. It's a strange thing to try to describe, but the scenery doesn't bother me anymore. The upset, the people that are upset, the horn honking now, even in Little West Texas town of Lubbock, you can't drive down the street without 14,000 people honking their horns because they're so upset at people. And when I first moved here, you couldn't hear that.
No.
After I'd come back from North Texas, I'd moved back from North Texas to come back here specifically to retire someday. So the scenery is just what it is. It's effortless. I don't have to do any head work about it. No head work at all. Just everything's effortless, and everything that comes in, it comes in and it goes out in its proper time. And that's kind of where I am at this time. So I really kind of owe everything to what you've told me, and that's it. That you were the final puzzle piece that snapped in.
Well, that's really good. Yeah, we don't really know what part we play in this whole game, but yeah, that's really nice that you've got to a state of peace with it all. And
yes.
But it's been there all along for you, Kevin. You obviously came in as a very powerful spiritual being, and that's just been there. But you've had the human experience running alongside. But
yes, and
what's quite interesting is most people that contact me are creative people. They tend to be people who are, maybe musicians or writers or artists, those kind of people. And it's actually quite unusual. I've spoken with one doctor, and you're the first dentist, and it's quite interesting that the sort of academic left hemisphere programming, which is installed, when you embark on those careers, it didn't actually overcome your spiritual, your kind of natural spiritual power. So that's a really good sign. The lady I spoke to, an Australian lady who's the doctor, she said, yeah, I did go through that. It's taken me 20 years to get rid of it. So, but it's really
coincidentally, I was a music major in college. My first time I went to college, I was a music major.
Wow.
And played the guitar and played the piano, and I was in the choir. But I'm also a painter. That's what I do from when I get up to when I go to bed. I paint.
Wow,
so
fantastic.
I don't know if I messed up your story or not. But
no, not at all. No, that confirms it. Actually, that's really good.
So yeah, and but when I was a music major, I figured out real quick I wasn't going to be able to make money on that. But go ahead.
Well, it's just really, it's really inspiring to see that, right from birth, being aware of birth, and the events from 2 years old and then right the way through childhood, that actually your spiritual nature has been present all along, and that's quite unusual. For some people, it sort of comes and goes, but it's been pretty consistent for you.
Yes, yeah, and I feel real good about that too. I don't know why I do. I just feel, hey, I'm glad that worked out. This wasn't such a waste of time anyway, and I've often wanted to tell my oldest brother, who told me that it's just this life and there's nothing else behind it. You said, there's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no nothing.
Wow.
And so
You
that
knew
kind of,
otherwise.
that always kind of, and I said, that's impossible. So anyway, here we are today, and I'm real appreciative of getting to run into you and get to talk to you.
Well, it's mutual, Kevin, and it's really, I really like the way the timing's been for you, because you mentioned before that you were able to take retirement only maybe 3 or 4 months earlier, but
right.
To be able to function from your infinite, effortless nature in retirement, it's a real bonus, actually.
Yeah, it really was. In fact, the first day I retired, I came home and sat down. I said, wow, I mean, everything's on the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's the everything. And passing through the stage called death, so what? It's just the next thing.
Yes.
It's just something's going to come through and go through. And you know, one of the things I really appreciate about you and your teaching is, and I've seen a lot of people. I've gone through a lot of folks, but you're the only person that didn't sit up at the front in an exalted position next to a flower in a vase and answer these questions and try to straighten everybody out. You never did that. You were just laid back and you talked your regular. You didn't have the Lucknow disease. You didn't talk in this guru babble. And that's why it kicked into gear, I think.
Well, thank you. But it's just the way it's been. It was revealed to me in a way, just that actually connecting with people in the way we connected is the most important thing, because on some level it's the same as the connection you've had with your brother. You know, it's actually, there is no connection really. It's just unity. But
yes,
it's available much more powerfully one-to-one than in group meetings. So
yes, I believe that. Yes, and maybe someday I'll fly over there.
Or I'll fly over to Texas. I'd like to come and have a ride in your car around that route you used to do the open eyes meditation on.
Open up. It's an experience, and it's a pleasant one. It helped me get through the real tough times that came up after COVID and all the confusion and everybody being upset and people losing their jobs and all the nonsense that went back and forth on the internet and the Facebook about why it was happening. And I thought, my God, who cares? Who cares why it happened? Because I wasn't out there. I was here. I was trying to focus here. Yes. But the open eye meditation really helped me to focus and get through it.
Yes.
And so I'm real appreciative of all that.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for spending some time having a conversation, because it's really nice just for people to see the ease of realization and just the way things can happen, because that's the most important thing, realizing that there is just the one being, we're all it. And the more access there is to that and the more ease and realization there is, then everyone gets a look in there.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate getting to talk with you as well.
Well, thanks, Kevin. And I'm sure we're going to be having some more conversations soon.
I love it. Anytime.
Brilliant. Great to talk to you, and hope to see you again soon.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.